And thanks very much for your time, man. I
Oh
know how
man, this
busy
is
you
awesome.
are.
I've been checking out your podcast. It's very interesting, man. I love interviewing, and I love
Being
finding out.
interviewed?
Well, I love I'm so curious about people that I love finding out methods and reasoning and stories to where they got to where they are. So it's great.
Yeah, well, thanks again, and that's fantastic. So you're in Vegas right now, right?
Yes.
Because you were covering the fight. How was it there? Like, can you tell me a little bit about the atmosphere in general? Because I've never been that fight, and I'm sure I've been boxing events, and I'm not even sure how they inside, particularly this kind of magnitude.
Look, there's nothing like a big time Las Vegas fight. You can get that statement right out of the way. The feeling, the collective atmosphere in the city of like, in a weird way, we're kind of all in this together for this one event. Now, with that said, this week didn't have that. Canelo Kovalev week didn't hit that mark, and I don't know if it's marketing and that we're switching and boxing and going on to all these new networks, the Zone, who maybe doesn't have the years of experience as the other ones, but it didn't have that feel until fight night. And Canelo fights are great because we know the Mexican and Mexican American boxing fans are the backbone of the sport, and they show up to Vegas and they show out. And by the time that main event came rolling around Saturday night, Canelo Kovalev, after the bizarre sort of the 90-minute delay to get there, you really felt that feeling. And I've said it before, it's not a cliche I invented, but the last 10 minutes of a big time boxing bout before the opening bell. So the ring walks, the atmosphere, the crowd chants, it's something that's electric. It's intoxicating. If they could put it in a syringe, I would probably do bad things with it. And it is just a feeling of anticipation that, I mean, it takes you back to, I try to trace this within my own DNA. I think it takes you back to that schoolyard, right? You always respect the kids who just don't care. They'll fight. They'll fight for anything. And there's sometimes one of those crossroads schoolyard fights that you're like, that guy's going to get that guy over what happened with that girl. And it happens and everyone runs over. And it's still that same visceral feeling, which is why boxing, as many times as you can try to kill it, as many times as it tries to kill itself, as the great Larry Merchant said, you can't fix it. You're certainly not going to kill it. And there's just something about a big-time boxing event that's different from UFC, that's different from anything else. And this week did have that when it was go time, because great storylines coming in, of course, with Canelo Alvarez, the great Mexican superstar, sort of going out of his way to take on a dangerous fight he doesn't have to, and that always adds a lot of drama and intrigue.
Did the fight itself meet your expectation?
It did in the end from a dramatic standpoint, because it was close, because it was entering round 11, which was the last round. You really didn't know who was winning on the scorecards were all over the place. And that's a whole separate debate over whether do you get a better view at home with the replays and the camera angles as you do ringside. And for example, first three rounds, I had Canelo up 3-0. Twitter was ready to take away my boxing badge and essentially
Yeah.
threaten my wife and children, because that's this game. And a lot of people were watching thinking Kovalev's up, but it's a different view from ringside. You see the punches landing crisper and cleaner. What this fight wasn't was the narrative we were explaining all week heading into it, which was what happens when the smaller fighter Canelo finally takes a legitimate light heavyweight punch. What's going to happen? What's the fight going to look like? Sergey Kovalev is Crusher. Well, it turned out at 36, Sergey Kovalev wasn't Crusher anymore. But in a weird backdoor sort of way, the fight did live up to expectations, because Sergey Kovalev committed to boxing, and somehow he was the boxer against the smaller fighter who became the puncher and the seeker in Canelo, and you had that drama. I think both of them were impressive, but didn't live up to their own individual expectations, yet it still made for a competitive fight with plenty at stake. And then when you get a finish like Canelo delivered in round 11, it's crazy. It was on my side of the ring watching it. It was violent. It was brutal. It was definitive. And that's what you want in a big-time fight. You don't want the typical sort of arguments and controversy, that come with the scorecards and the judges and all that. Canelo took it out of the judges' hands, and I'm not here for anyone's old man Kovalev takes, because that man at 36 came in there and tried to win the fight, and the smaller, better fighter got rid of him. What else could you ask for in the conversation of pound for pound than that?
What do you think of his game plan, the Kovalev's? Seems like you're trying to jab, which makes sense. He has a reach, but I guess it didn't work out in the end.
If I'm going to say what do they do wrong, he never did the thing that you need to do against a smaller fighter in any sort of situation, which is, Max Kellerman used to say, discipline them. Essentially, it means gain respect by landing a firm, hard power shot early that makes them realize, if I'm going to have the success I intend to have, there's a danger, there's a price, there's a toll I'll have to pay. Here's what's interesting about Fight Week. And I did a bunch of Radio Row podcasts, talk to everybody, Kovalev's manager, trainer, promoter, former opponents, everybody. And I'm the guy going, look, it's a 36-year-old slugger with big power. If he doesn't go in there and be the man and push around the smaller guy and essentially make this a 6-round fight rather than a 12-round fight, he's got no chance to beat Canelo on the scorecards. We know what happens when you go to the decision against Canelo. But you know what happened? Every person, including Kovalev's trainer, Buddy McGirt, was like, no, he's a boxer. He's going to box. That's his best chance to win. It turns out they were right, and I'm just some jamoke here trying to build up my own angles. But it's interesting, the evolution of Kovalev, figuring out how to find later life through more pure boxing, something certainly Manny Pacquiao is doing right now at 40 years old. So he danced with who he brung, and you got to give him the credit that he entered round 11 with 1 scorecard even, 2 scorecards at 96-94 for Canelo. I had it even. Many people on Twitter had Kovalev up by a round or 2 rounds. He legitimately entered the championship rounds with a chance to win, and a chance to win legitimately. Not one of those wins where it's like, well, I thought Triple G did enough, but it is Canelo. Canelo's going to get the decision. No, this was Kovalev who straight up put on a jabbing clinic out there, and you got to take your hat off to him. The best part about this victory for Alvarez was that it didn't happen because of the fears we had coming in. Kovalev is a little bit of a front runner, yes. Doesn't like it to the body, questionable chin, all those things. Kovalev showed up. He didn't lose because he's damaged goods or he doesn't have it. He lost because a better historic fighter knocked him out. It's a win for boxing. Fantastic. Loved it.
What do you think is next for Canelo now? Do you think he's going to take on the other two, Beterbiev and Bivol, or what's the on Pascal? Where he's going from here?
No, look, he chose Kovalev for a reason. Very dangerous. But probably the easiest path to a title at 175 when you consider those other players. Now that Archer Beterbiev has 2 of the 4 titles, blowing through people. I know Canelo did the Canelo thing, which is I'll fight him. But here's the thing. Canelo chases history. He certainly chases the price tag of dollars mixed with that, but not nearly as much as a Floyd Mayweather, who would put that first and foremost. What's the most amount of money I can make for the least amount of risk? Canelo's more like, what risk can I take that gives me category furthers my legacy? I don't think there's anything right now at 168 or 175 that really does that for him. I think it's more likely that he goes back down to 160. Everybody wants him to fight Triple G a 3rd time. I think Canelo knows what a lot of us know and maybe aren't willing to admit, that Triple G is past that hill a little bit. Outfought Sergey Derevyanchenko to win back a title in early October. Life or death. It was hell. Triple G's 37. Canelo probably going to win that trilogy, but he said it himself. I have nothing to prove Triple G at the moment. I'm sort of from the idea now, okay, so if Canelo comes back down to 160, he didn't bulk up like a lot of fighters do when they move up. So I don't have as much fear for a Roy Jones, Antonio Tarver situation where coming back down will leave him compromised. I think he's sort of going to come back because DAZN's got a lot of middleweights, make a fun fight there, and look at the map and say, what's that next big, great white whale? What's the big thing historically that I can chase? And it's funny. I do a podcast for CBS Sports called The State of Combat, boxing podcast with Rafe Bartholomew. Rafe was on me for a couple weeks going, what if Andre Ward came out of retirement? What if we did Canelo Andre Ward at 175? And I'm like, bro, no. Okay, it's too much risk. Canelo's not a light heavyweight. Well, I'm sorry, BC, talking to myself here. Canelo is a light heavyweight, and he just knocked out one of the biggest punchers of this generation. So if Andre Ward came out of retirement at 35 and put his pound-for-pound stance and unbeaten record on the line against Canelo, they're both kind of blown-up smaller fighters. I think that could be an incredible fight. You don't really see Canelo talking about that a lot. You see more Andre Ward talking about it when he's being asked. I think that's a fight that would satisfy enough commercial appeal, and certainly from a critical standpoint would be like a legacy-defining fight. I mean, Canelo lost when he stepped up to the very highest level against Floyd. He's got some amazing Hall of Fame attritable victories over the Miguel Cottos, the Arislani Laras, Gennady Golovkin. But imagine if this next year he did something like beat Golovkin definitively in a trilogy and then sniff out maybe fighting Andre Ward, that other guy of this era. If you're going to say who's the man of the post-Floyd and Manny era, well, it's a loaded question because Manny won't go away and Floyd's always threatening to come back. But it's certainly Canelo now from a star standpoint, and now obviously from a critical standpoint with the rise he's doing at pound for pound. But that other guy is Andre Ward, who walked away on his own terms. Oh man, you're getting me fired up talking about this fight.
Who would you favor that fight?
I'd still have to favor Andre Ward because he would be the bigger man of the two. And he has a way to figure out how to every single type of fighter. He can get dirty. He can slug if he has to. We saw him against Kovalev, walk through hell, get on inside and get him out of there. Yes, low blows, but he certainly rocked him with a right hand first. He's so adaptable, and he's one of the rare guys because he's had long breaks, considerably long breaks due to injury and due to suing his promoter and going down the legal road, that he's sort of Mayweather-like in that regard, where the long breaks don't scare you. He's very unflappable in that manner. I'm still blown away by what Canelo's doing, but yet I'd still take Andre Ward because whenever you're matching boxer against puncher and the terms are relatively equal, I'm always going to take the boxer. And that doesn't mean that Canelo's not a great boxer, but you saw on Saturday against Kovalev, he turned into the punch. He turned into the bigger man against a guy 2 weight divisions above. This man Canelo's got big huevos. We just got to say it. It is what it is. He's amazing.
Where do you think it puts him in pound for pound?
It's a great question, and it's going to be a debate that's probably going to play out on every website this week. I've gone on record in saying this is a very rare and almost historic time, that there's not only not a clear-cut pound-for-pound number one like in the past. Let's say Floyd would be number one. You can go, okay, well, I like Manny. I also like Andre Ward. And then some hipster might say, I like Donito Donare. That's fine. But you still got number one, and you got a couple that are sniffing around. Right now, I legitimately feel you have 6 fighters who have a case at number one. And that's crazy, but it's true. It's the welterweights. It's the Crawford and the Spence. It's Lomachenko, who was my number one entering this weekend. It's Canelo. It's Alexander Usyk. It's the Japanese monster, Naoya Inoue, who is blowing all of us away. Should Canelo be number one now? This is the debate. Because when you're making pound for pound, and everybody has – the problem with the pound for pound is this, okay? Most people think it's BS. It's not BS, okay? Boxing is BS. We've got 17 divisions, 4 champions per division, and then the WBA and WBC are sprinkling extra champions on. So nobody can do anything historic anymore. Adrian Broner's a 4-time champion, hasn't beaten anybody, okay? So that just shows you where we're at in boxing. So sometimes the only true currency in boxing are things like lineal champions and who you deem to be pound for pound. And so we think, oh, it's a bunch of nerds in a room in their mom's basement. Well, sometimes that is. I've been around boxing media a long time. But it's really sort of a way to say who's the best. And a lot of that debate is built upon accomplishment. But I think even more, and this is where I get into debates with people, I think you lean even more to the eye test. Right now, this moment, who would win if all these guys were in the same mythical weight class and they had the same advantages that they have in their current weight class in that mythical weight class, and you sort of match it up. You got to do a lot of boxing math. It gives people headaches. But under that regard, it's kind of hard. Would Canelo beat Lomachenko head-to-head if everything was even? Would Canelo beat Terrence Crawford head-to-head? You're going to get a lot of people who are going to kind of rightfully say no, he wouldn't. Some of his biggest fights, he got the benefit of the doubt on the scorecards. He's amazing, but Crawford's sort of supernatural next level. Lomachenko's a wizard and all that stuff. But I do want to counter that. I want to counter that by saying this. What the hell else would Canelo have to do? Can I recap Canelo's last 14 months for you, okay? He walks down Triple G and gets a close decision. Yes, I had it for Triple G. Some people had it at a draw. Canelo beat him. 2 months later, he moves up to 168 and folds up in a suitcase Rocky Fielding. Oh, you don't think Rocky Fielding's a killer? That's fine. A couple months later, unifies titles against the prime Danny Jacobs in a great boxing performance at middleweight, and then moves up 2 divisions and knocks out one of the greatest punchers and most dangerous fighters of this era. That's the definition of being pound for pound, of being able to go to any weight class and be who you are at each of those weight classes and take chances and do all that stuff. Yes, that's also Lomachenko's MO, but if Canelo Alvarez cannot be your pound-for-pound king after what happened last night for me in Las Vegas, then he'll never get that chance, right? Like, Floyd Mayweather's not coming back through that door. We're not going to see Floyd Canelo at middleweight. So I'm comfortable right now, and I'll probably write it this week saying, look, it's close at the top, but Canelo just did the type of move that you have to respect and inevitably you have to reward. What are you going to do? Keep him at number 3? No, put him number 1. Crown him Dennis Green. He is who we thought he was, all right?
So what are the next? So let's just create Bryan Campbell's pound-for-pound list of first 5 people. So Canelo is first, right?
Yes, I got Lomachenko at 2 because I do think he's entering the twilight in his early 30s, but he's certainly not washed, and he's done so many amazing things, and he's fighting over his head. He's number 2, guys. Let's understand what we're watching in this guy. Number 3 is Terrence Crawford, and I really believe once we see Terrence Crawford consistently fight elite welterweights, if he can make moves with the PBC side of the street and stop fighting these mean machine type guys, I understand the situation, then he's going to show you. Because look, we all want to see Crawford Spence. And if we all are going to be honest and look in the mirror, we're going to say you have to favor Crawford mythically in that fight because he's an abstract painter. He colors outside of the lines. He can do things outside of the traditional orthodox ways that show you can do extra stuff. I got him 3 for now, but believe me, he's making moves. I like Monster Inoue at 4. I think the people that already made him number 1 are getting a little too happy. He's blowing away everybody put in front of him. He's going up in weight to do it. He's sort of doing everything we want, but we're always going to hold it against those guys in the smaller weight classes and ask, are you fighting the same level of danger and competition? It helped Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez in the perfect period after Floyd retired and Chocolatito slipped into our DMs and was number 1 for a while. But I like the Monster there. He may make moves. I like Spence at 5. We obviously don't know where he's going next, but I think the way that he beat Sean Porter in a very good fight of the year contender, I think we saw the first crack in his armor to the degrees. I think he took Sean Porter too lightly, and I think he probably should have stopped him, and he didn't. Maybe had the wrong mindset coming in. Porter had a plus performance. Porter had an elite performance. You got to give him credit. But I'm fine with that there. And then I like Usyk at 6 because I think in the end he's going to be the skeleton key for the heavyweight division. But if he does that, if he goes in there against the champions right now and can avoid their punches and can beat them, it's very rare that you put a heavyweight in the top 10 under my ranking system. It's very rare because the pound for pound system is created to almost offset what heavyweights do. Because if we're doing who's the best in the world, I don't care how good your middleweight champion is, you put him in there against Anthony Joshua, he's going to get knocked out. We know that's going to happen. Pound for pound is created to sort of offset that. It's rare for a heavyweight to get in there, but Usyk's almost doing these Lomachenko type things in which he's fighting at a weight class over his head and going to test his skills against the level of danger. Still need time for that to play out, but I got him about, 5 or 6. That's what I'm looking at right now. Of course, there's other names around that are great. Pacquiao's still lingering. Golovkin's still lingering, depending on what you believe where he's at right now. I think Thurman's going to bounce back. Mikey Garcia's still lingering, all that great stuff. Josh Taylor on the rise, Better Beef on the rise. But those are my top 5 or 6, so I think all are kind of really close right now and are going to have a chance to separate themselves.
So let's now talk about events that happened on Madison Square Garden last night. Did you have a chance to watch any of that?
I did. I watched most of it from ringside because of the horrific pacing by DAZN, who 2 days before the fight had made the announcement that they're not going to go head-to-head with the UFC 244 main event, which really got polarizing reactions. Some fans were like, yes, great, I can watch the end of Masvidal Diaz and then wait for Canelo to start after that. Other people who are more into the boxing versus MMA debate right now are sort of like, wait, what? So I was able to watch most of that card from ringside, and then, as a lot of people know, at the MGM Grand, they paused the main event, Canelo Kovalev.
Which was bizarre, right?
An unprecedented move for over 90 minutes to allow for not only for the UFC main event to go on, but they put it on the big screen in the arena with the volume playing. The MGM got permission from ESPN, which put on the pay-per-view to do that. So it's really cool if you're in the crowd and you cared about both and you had money on both or whatever. But if you're watching at home on DAZN, I don't see how this is anything but a stain. And I know DAZN has come out and sort of said, hey, look, our internal numbers say this was a gamble that worked for us. After that UFC main event, everybody came over to us. That's fine. But at the end of the day, it's also about messaging and brand power. I don't know who picked the date first between DAZN and UFC 244. We can go back and look. But either way, at the end of the day, they're competing against each other. If you're DAZN, you said, we're going on this night. We heard UFC's got this card. We're not going to change our times. We're not going to back down. So you are competing. And if you are competing, you've got to compete. You've got to put your best foot forward. I think the boxing versus MMA debate is tired and old, but at the same time, DAZN made a statement last night to its fans that UFC 244 was more important than their main event, and they vamped and wasted time. And if you're watching at home, and it's on the East Coast, and we're approaching 1 a.m., and I think the main event, Canelo Kovalev, didn't go on until something like 1:30 Eastern, if I might be wrong on a little bit. But, I mean, that's inexcusable. And the message that it's sending, and let's not even mention the message that it's sending to the fighters. Yeah. Canelo got paid $35 million from DAZN for this fight. He has 35 million reasons to kick the door down and go, what the hell are we doing here? He was gloved up. He was shirtless. He was warmed up. And then he's laying on a couch watching the screen like the rest of us going, what are we doing? This is a different sport 3,000 miles away on a different network, and we're bending for that. Even if you don't agree with if you're here to compete, you have to compete. You can softly punt, by the way, to zone. Do you know what that means? That means go back and look at the last 5 UFC pay-per-views. Take the average of when the main event starts. Let's say your numbers tell you midnight. Go, okay, we're starting Canelo Kovalev at 11 p.m. Eastern. Everybody wins. I'm sorry, everybody wins. Or just be a man and go head-to-head. I really did not enjoy that. Even though I got a chance to watch 244, I could talk about it with you. It was amazing. At the same time, this was friggin' bizarre.
Yeah, I'm sure Dana White is enjoying the situation, and they have a lot of positive things to talk about internally. But yeah, I thought it was interesting at least. But maybe not bizarre, but I mean bizarre for boxing definitely. But its situation is weird, but unique.
Like I get that they avoid college football programming most time by starting the fights late, but at some point you got to dig in and say we have the better product. And I'm sorry, on Saturday night, I love Diaz Masvidal more than anyone coming in.
I know.
The better fight was Canelo Kovalev. There was more history. Canelo's a bigger star than all of the people involved. I don't know how you back down from that. A lot of people tweeting, hey, if this was Floyd Mayweather and Showtime, that never would have happened. And you know what? You're damn right that never would have happened. What are we doing here?
So how was that BMF fight for you? What your key? How do you?
My big takeaway.
Takeaway. Here you go. That's the word.
It's insane how much it surprised me when they were walking to the cage, and the crowd reaction inside Madison Square Garden was through the roof. How much I got these like almost like feels as if I was part of their teams, right? That they made it. Like this was so insane that this fight happened, that Dana White would reward these counterculture superstars who they were so real for so long that they had to fight the machine. They had to be anti-establishment for so long, and that they stuck so firm to who they were that eventually the machine came around and opened the door for them. Like, it's insane. It's inspiring in some weird way too. And the fact that UFC in 2019 would put a non-title bout in the main event between two badasses and just say, hey, go fight to the death in there. Let's be badasses. It's a throwback to what a lot of us, whether we'll admit it or not, was the reason we got into watching MMA and UFC, that just, damn, we're going to find out some answers right now in the most raw way possible. And I think for the 3 rounds that it lasted, and specifically that first round, it lived up or exceeded our expectations coming in, which is insane. I thought that the storyline build wasn't strong for this one in the end because you had 2 guys who were great at being the adversary against more of a baby face, if you will, if you're using pro wrestling terms. They're both sort of perfect, lovable villains, and they were refusing to sort of take out their wrath on each other. But they're so real that when that opening, horn sounded, you knew they were going to quote unquote fight to the death, which is really a bad terminology, but you get the meaning there. Masvidal just evolving into the level of confident striker that he is right now is insane, because this is the same guy 2 years ago in the same building. We watched Stephen Thompson just pick him apart, and he looked like he didn't belong there. So to know his emotional journey to get to this point and to see that his explosive striking worked and he was hurting Nate Diaz and dropped him, and then to see Nate just be a friggin' Diaz, bite down with his face falling apart and rally back and have these glimpses where you're like, if this fight goes 5, he's going to stop him. He's going to figure it out. Yes, it was anticlimactic to see the state of New York, which has built a quick reputation since MMA has been re-legalized there a few years ago for being a interesting commission. I know a lot of the decisions they make are linked back to that heavyweight boxing tragic situation where Magomed Abdussalamov, the heavyweight boxer, went into the coma. They didn't get the right treatment. He didn't pass away, but he's still compromised from that. That with the lawsuits, they're being extra safe. Was it anticlimactic to see a BMF title fight end on a doctor stoppage? It certainly was, because you felt like Diaz, who was down on the cards, might have been coming on. But the more I looked at the replays of the eye, the cuts above and below, I mean, that was vicious.
Yeah.
And do you remember after McGregor and Nate Diaz 2 at UFC 202? And that was one of the better fights in UFC history, right? 5-round war, on the feet the whole time, give and take. They both poured out the jug. Dana White said afterwards, I don't want to do a trilogy because, like, these guys are going to damage each other permanently. Like, these guys don't know how to take a step back. They're going to, give us the kind of fight that we dream of, the gaudy war of MMA. And it's weird. I'm watching this main event, this BMF thing. I'm so into the violence of it. They're giving us what we want. They're living out their own legacies and destinies and reputations in front of us. And I started to go, they might permanently hurt each other. Dana might not be wrong here. So it's anticlimactic, but it's going to set up a rematch, and it's going to be big money, and we're all going to care about it. And what I hope this rematch does is the hope I had from the beginning. Dana White came out and said, look, we're going to kowtow to you. We're going to make a $50,000 BMF title, but it's going to be a one-time only. Nate, you brought this into existence. We're going to have fun. The Rock is here. Everybody's great. We're going to say the F word a whole bunch of times on the air. We all love the BMF. Yay. But it's one time. It's a pro wrestling gimmick. And a lot of us are going, hey, dude, this is the entertainment business, right? You give title shots to people that don't deserve it all the damn time. Remember 46-year-old Dan Henderson a few years ago? CM Punk is always in the cage when he doesn't belong to be. Can we just have this title and just basically say, like, you got to be a savage to fight for it? You just agree on the weight and do it? They say no. I think two roads could emerge from this. One, that they go, look, the fans love the crap out of this. It's okay to have a fight that's built around just the fact that it's a fight. Like, let's do this thing. And then number two, is it a coincidence that all these BMFers live between the lightweight and welterweight, in that gap where everybody wants a 165-pound division? I don't particularly want one, but I'm also sore as a boxing first guy who got into MMA. Love the fact that UFC does all the things that boxing doesn't do, right? All the bad things, boxing does, UFC tends to do the opposite. Now they're getting into more boxing-type decisions with all the interim belts, with the creating of new divisions. I just want to see this thing be a thing, because do you know how much we love guys like Cowboy Cerrone, like Justin Gaethje, Mike Perry? These guys may F around and end up in a title fight eventually, but at the same time, they're there for the same thing that I think at least half of the audience is there for too. I mean, that Just Bleed guy from back in the day, there's a lot of people living in the U.S. who are smelling what that guy's cooking, and I think the BMF is the perfect sort of gift to the fans that I hope continues on. And I don't want to see Nate's face fall apart permanently. So in the end, I was actually okay with it. Kill me, take away my hardcore badge. I thought the doctors may have actually got it right.
So do you think this second, if the rematch happens, which seems like they're both talking about it, and I'm not sure if Masvidal was as confident about giving a rematch, but do you think it's going to be as much interest in the fight or less?
I actually think more, because I think it was odd when they had that first press conference to announce the fight, and UFC did it on the water in Manhattan and down near Brooklyn there. And it was like the best backdrop ever with the Brooklyn Bridge behind it. And we're like, oh my God, Masvidal and Diaz are here. Jorge's wearing the Scarface suit. This is the best thing ever. And then they did the press conference and nothing happened. And it was weird.
Nice to each other, yeah.
Yeah. And these bottom feeding journalists in the crowd were like, so Nate, are you getting high? And like, we're just like, bro, like, come on now. This gives you a narrative. The narrative is Nate kind of got screwed from the idea of what BMF is. They both are the realists. Jorge had an insanely great quote after the fight, which is like, I don't like this. I like my opponents to be unconscious. And while that might be jarring at first, if you think about it, like, I don't want fighters to think that way. I don't win unless I finish this guy. And it's great. It's great. It's a guaranteed blockbuster main event. I think it would have the same interest, if not more, because we got a sample size of how great this fight can be.
So any other fights you liked on the card? Because, I mean, it was a very strong card, to be honest. Quite a few of
really
those
played out
fights
well.
could be a main event for like a fight night.
I was very surprised at Darren Till's performance to outpoint Kelvin Gastelum. I thought he was in a desperation mode coming off 2 defeats, moving up to middleweight there, and Gastelum looked so great against Adesanya in that fight of the year contender that I'm like, he's going to walk through him. And to see Darren Till pull out that victory, and I've never been high on Darren Till and been open about it, and then to see him afterwards be like, I was on the verge of faking an injury. I was on the verge, like, mentally of just kind of collapsing heading into this fight. I love when people are real and vulnerable, and now I'm suddenly like, I want to cheer for this guy. It was a strong win. He stuck to a technical game plan that worked. And I've been a day one-ish guy on Kevin Lee saying he's going to wear a UFC title one day. Even if they don't create a 165 belt, this guy has the goods. You just can't figure it out and put the package together. I like that he was back at lightweight, even though it's hard for him to make, and even though that's the deepest division in UFC history at this moment. He rolled the dice against Gregor Gillespie, and I thought he was getting hit too much, and then he delivers the highlight reel knockout, and you see Gillespie's head slam against the cage, and you're like, maybe Kevin Lee can be this guy. He needed that victory and he got it. And you love those sort of moments. And I think the other fight that had the most interest was Johnny Walker and at light heavyweight. And
surprised fight, highlight.
He's had so many highlight reel, and I'm not a Johnny Walker guy. I think he's bizarre and carnival and comical and circus, like to a negative degree. Not as bad as Michel Pereira, another Brazilian fighter who was doing backflips off the cage and stuff. But I thought, Johnny Walker, I got to see you against a grinder, and that's what Corey Anderson is. And I felt good for Corey Anderson to get that knockout win. Yeah, he went overboard in the celebration, but let's not forget, he went out of his way to try to create a pro wrestling angle to get John Jones, and the company said, no, sorry, bro, you don't move the knee. Like, you're not that guy. We don't look at you as that guy. It's kind of hard not to look at him as that guy because he strung together quietly a bunch of wins that you go, this is a shallow division. Maybe he does deserve a John Jones fight, and with his outward trash talking ability, it's going to be interesting.
So some people was thinking that it's early stoppage, but when I looked at Johnny Walker, I think he was lost. He didn't.
Yeah, he was buzzed. He was banged up. I think that was a fine stoppage. He had actually a pretty bad cut on his cheek as well. He got solved straight up, and there's no problem with that. When you record the type of insane victories that Johnny Walker did, and what do you have, like 3 of them within 45 seconds or within a minute? It was just sort of like hyper athleticism, perfect timing, all that stuff. He doesn't know how good he is in reality, and it would be hard if you score those type of wins not to maybe elevate your belief in yourself. And Corey Anderson is one of those veterans who's gonna find out if you're the real. And in this moment, he wasn't. But I like what UFC does. Losses don't kill a person. And I come from the boxing world where we put so much around that zero. And I don't know if you watched one of the more refreshing moments of this year when Julian Williams, the boxing junior middleweight, beat Jarrett Hurd to unify 154-pound titles. He walked Jarrett Hurd, the bigger fighter, down the whole fight. He out-Jarretted Jarrett Hurd. He came in there with 1 loss, and everybody said, sorry, J-Rock, you're not that guy. We saw you get knocked out against a Charlo brother. And before the fight, he was like, you can improve from a loss. And he caught a great promo after that win that was like, hey, everybody in boxing, like, hey, media, can we stop killing a guy for 1 defeat? Like, you can evolve and change and grow. And certainly for Johnny Walker or even Greg Hardy when he moves up next weekend and faces Alexander Volkov. And, spoiler alert, he's probably going to get his ass kicked. It's not the end of the world to lose a fight and then figure things out and come back.
Yeah, particularly if you lose into somebody like Volkov and Corey Anderson is definitely legit. He didn't have a hype around him. So, how about we talk about the pound for pound in MMA? I'm curious, what's your list of 5?
Khabib right now, and I've been a John Jones guy for forever, and I thought since his comeback, he's looked more cerebral, he's looked more controlled. I think he did go in the opposite direction against Thiago Santos in that he was a little too comfortable, right? You didn't go. There were openings, there were advantages. He didn't take advantage of them in that regard like I thought he should have. Khabib, what he did to Dustin Poirier, who seemed to be outside of Tony Ferguson, like the prototypical guy that if you're going to make a case, who could solve Khabib? Poirier's kind of was so well-rounded coming in, like maybe he's that guy, and he was so red hot. And we all saw in the desert there. I mean, Khabib just destroyed him. Khabib is the best fighter in the world. It's not and that's the bottom line. That's just what it is. That's what we're seeing. The crazy thing is that 28-0, whatever he is, like, I don't think he's going to fight forever. I think he may only fight 3-4 more times. And he's got a chance to walk away with one of those, like, prime, pristine legacies where you're like, what the heck do we do with this guy historically? We've never seen him, compromised or lose a round barely, and like, so he's the best in the world for me. I like John Jones still at number 2 because he's fought everybody. I do like what he's trying to do in his 30s. It's Floyd Mayweather like to a certain degree. He's trying to be more efficient. I would like to see him though finish a guy when he feels like he can, because he almost backdoored a cheap loss there against a ballsy Thiago Santos who really put it all on the line. I like him there certainly, and I think Israel Adesanya flipped things upside down. I have him at number 5 now. I think that win over Whitaker just made an insane leap as to like, I'm the next big thing. I really am that guy. I walked him down. And trying to think off the top of my head who I have in between there. I've still got Tony Ferguson at 4, and a lot of people are getting mad at me because he's not a champion because he's constantly in and out of the cage. How do you have that guy there? I'm like, watch his fights. Like if there's one guy who could beat Khabib, who's crazy enough to be able to do it and want to go in those waters to do it, it probably indefinitely is him. And I've got, obviously the same respect for Max Holloway in that pound for pound mix as well. I'm trying to think who I'm forgetting though at number 3, but I think it's a 2-horse game with Jones and Khabib, and it's really what you prefer at this moment.
So speaking of Khabib and Ferguson, right? So I don't think they as of yesterday they didn't announce the fight yet, right? What do you think? Is there a chance that they're gonna stick McGregor somehow? What's the?
I've said that until you find out officially that Khabib Tony is signed, and even then it's not concrete, right? Because it's like the 5th time that we're trying this thing. Really, until the two walk in the cage, I would not put it past the UFC that somehow McGregor finds his way into a Khabib fight. And it's obvious in so many ways, even with McGregor announcing this phantom January 18th comeback that the UFC really won't confirm. They say there's talks, but it's not concrete. It's a lottery ticket in a jar, the idea of Khabib Conor 2. If you're the UFC with everything going on with Conor outside the cage, like, you really don't have the confidence that he's going to keep his life together to fight consistently, or that he's going to come back and be the same guy. Like, Conor might come back against a Cowboy or Justin Gaethje or even like a Frankie Edgar type, and he may lose. Like, you just don't know. The way that cage rust held him down against Khabib, and the way that he just got dominated in every other aspect and got outstruck by a wrestler, like it just was sort of a wake-up call that who he was on that insane build, that magic's gone. And I don't know if he can recapture that. So that's part of the thinking of your UFC, of saying, we could lose this lottery ticket, or it could get dampened or watered down. But the fight to make is undoubtedly Khabib Tony, and it's almost poetic that we had to wait this long, because now the fight means more than it ever could have or would have, and both have been through so much. But if you go back and compile Dana White's quotes, it's troubling. When he's asked about it, he's like, oh yeah, that fight's definitely next, but we got to see about Tony. We got to see if he accepts it. You know what that means. Let's see if he takes the number we throw out at him, which will probably be some kind of low ball. Yeah. So it's frustrating as heck, but you got to make that fight. No one is more deserving, no one, than Tony Ferguson. So make the damn fight already.
Who do you have in that fight? I know you're gonna say, look, it's impossible. I know, but who would Bryan Campbell think would win?
All right, Ferguson is the only guy who can do that, because look, his ground game is sick. He can wrestle, and he's got such a weird, frenetic style, striking pace that you can't prepare for. I don't know how you would prepare for that and be able to handle that. And he has, like, there's certain variables and intangibles when you break down a big fight. I used to say this about McGregor. Do you remember obviously you remember the run he was on that ended with the Eddie Alvarez fight? There was almost an element of with magic. Did you say magic? You just said the word.
Because I was captivated. I was like, man, what did we do before this guy came in? And
there was an element, and I used to say, like, I don't know if he's dabbling in the dark magic and the dark arts in the. I don't know if there's like a crystal ball and he's killing chickens, but there was a belief in that stretch that man could do anything. And when you handicapped a fight, which is why I picked Conor to come back from 2 years and knock Khabib out, and people are like, dude, like, do you not see this? And I'm like, the magic is real, guys. I watched him knock out Jose Aldo when he had no business doing it. I watched him lure Eddie Alvarez into a kind of a reckless brawl and just take him out with a 4-punch combo. I watched this man believe things into action. So that had to become part of the scouting report. Some people laugh at it. I think it's legitimate. I'm going to say the same thing about Tony Ferguson, but say the guy's a sadistic animal. He does not care. He will walk into oncoming traffic and wave at you while he's doing it. He will take pain willingly, openly, to test you and break you. Now, no one's going to break Khabib, but his willingness to stand in there through everything. Could you imagine a scenario in which the fight goes to the ground, Tony punts around on his back, but like he's always going to keep coming back? That would be interesting, because the idea of Khabib it's interesting. The 223 performance from Khabib against Al Iaquinta is like, I can't tell if we should double down on the meaning of it because of the mental F he was going through with Conor attacking the bus, and then the late opponent switches and not knowing he's fighting Iaquinta till like 24 hours before, and not to mention Raging Al is a good ass Al, a solid guy, and we saw Khabib dominate that fight. Excuse me, but at the same time sort of fade late a bit, be unable to really do what he does in the last 2 rounds. Is that who Khabib really is in a 5-round fight or not? We don't really know that yet Ferguson would be the guy to potentially expose that. This is a long way of me saying until Khabib loses, I cannot pick against him. Until he's showing like, I mean, do you realize I've made a lot of Floyd Khabib comparisons, and it's from the standpoint of dominance, and it's from the standpoint of like when we were handicapping Floyd's fights on this pay-per-view run that he was on, it was sort of like, well, remember that time Zab Judah hit him with that one shot? Or remember that time Shane Mosley rocked him with that one shot? And then you're always picking out these single moments, and it's like that with Khabib. Well, Michael Johnson lit him up. Well, did he really light him up? You know, Gleason Tebow had success on the ground 9 years. Well, did he really? Like, you're picking apart the most minuscule moment to try to say, no, Khabib is operating on such an insane level. I think that fight might even go the distance. It would be sick and it'd be out of control, but I think Khabib can win that fight.
So if you would think of both boxing and MMA, like give me your goats in both of the sports.
Greatest of all time.
Correct.
I was interviewing Larry Mert, the great Larry Mert, 88-year-old Larry Merchant, the former boxing writer, HBO boxing analyst, the best. One of those guys that you're like, can we take him and Ted Williams' head and freeze them now so they can be around forever, so they can tell us the stories of having been there at Ali Liston 1 and 2 and having seen the changes in the sport. And I was like, Larry, I had a great moment with my son, 11 years old, the other day. He's like, Dad, where are you going? I'm like, big boxing. He's like, it's Floyd fighting. I go, no, Canelo's fighting. You know Canelo. He's whatever. And he's like, oh, but Floyd's the best of all time, right? And I'm like, well, no. I mean, Floyd's great, but he's certainly not the best of all time. He's like, who is it? And I'm like, son, you're programmed to have to say it's Sugar Ray Robinson. But I'm going to be really honest with you. If you say it's Sugar Ray Robinson, that means you're admitting that Sugar Ray Robinson's prime at welterweight, for some reason, you cannot get video of those fights. They do not exist. I don't understand how they don't exist, but the run he had at welterweight where he advanced to what, like 102-1 or something absurd before he moved up to middleweight and had a lot of these legendary fights, there's no record of it. So it's the people like the Larry Merchants who actually saw that you have to talk to and sort of say. But with all that said, with watching video, with the research, Sugar Ray Robinson seems to be that dude. I could understand if somebody's just like, no, Ali's the greatest. Okay, that's cool. But Sugar Ray Robinson, with the movement up in weight, with the insane record, with the mixture of speed and power and the ability to knock people out, coming at him, walking away, he was the perfect, complete, intelligent, brilliant combination of like Floyd and Sugar Ray Leonard, as blasphemous as that sounds to even say out loud. Like, he just seemed to be the guy. Can I prove it? No. I'm going a little bit on legend speak here. But it's really no different than opening up a baseball almanac and trying to make an argument that Babe Ruth was the best of all time because of the numbers. I mean, did he face black pitchers? I mean, there's a lot of elements in there. Although, isn't it weird, though, that boxing is the only sport that we all acknowledge that the guys of the past are better than the guys today, right? I know, like, there's certain guys today that are going to be better because of athleticism and height and size. I mean, 6'9", Tyson Fury is absurd. But every other sport, you're like, well, George Mikan was great, but can he post up Shaq? No. In boxing, we're all like, Floyd's pretty good, but imagine if he fought Sugar Ray Leonard, or imagine if he fought Sugar Ray Robinson. It's like, it's such an inverted pyramid there. But to answer your question on MMA, I think the upper room table that I like to talk about, of the people that have an argument to be the MMA GOAT. And let's realize this sport is, 25 years old, right? Yeah, I mean, it's so friggin' early. It's ridiculous. It's so early that the sport as we know it now, we may look back 20 years and be like, that's archaic. That was like the caveman era, the same way we look back at like UFC 1, 2, and 3. But John Jones has a stake in this argument. GSP does. Anderson Silva. Fedor, to a certain degree. I think Daniel Cormier flirted with this category, and the loss to Stipe kind of leaves him dangling. And if you said Demetrius Johnson, I wouldn't hate you. I think everybody else, the Jose Aldos, the Randy Coutures, are all sort of that next level down. But of that amazing group, best fighter I've ever seen, and I've been watching since, UFC 2, so, and I certainly have seen it all, it's John Jones. It still is. He's the best of all time. And the fact that he could so openly sort of punt in his prime and party and do all these crazy things and then show up on fight night and deliver those type of performances. I mean, I don't think people realize that, yes, when John Jones came of age in the light heavyweight division, it had been the most star-studded, deepest division in the sport's history, maybe only eclipsed now by lightweight with Khabib and Tony and all them. Yes, he caught some of those guys on the end, Rashad Evans, Rampage, all those guys. But that run he went on in like a 2-year span of like destroying Shogun, Machida, Rampage, Rashad, like that 5-6 fight stretches. I just don't think it's been bested or will be bested. And the fact that he's been able to go away with these controversies and come back and still be that guy without issue. Those size advantages are insane. The crazy strikes and techniques are all-time great. But if he didn't have that backbone, the one that came out against Gustafsson the first fight when he was partying and certainly wasn't up to his speed, he wouldn't be in this conversation. He has an all-time great chin, ability to absorb damage, ability to make adjustments when things are crazy, when he's hurt, that I've never seen a better fighter. And I loved what Anderson Silva did. I think you can question some of the, the runs that in terms of who he fought. I love GSP. What else could GSP do right now to make us not love him more? But John Jones is the guy.
So you're obviously very knowledgeable in both MMA and boxing, which probably goes back some time. So I'm curious to learn a little bit more about Bryan Campbell as a person.
Yes.
Finally, huh? So I'm curious. I want to understand, when did you become interested in combat sports, and what was the circumstances?
It was the early 80s. Like I was born in 1978. So like a lot of kids of my era, the Rocky movies were like this insane introduction to boxing and what it could be like. So to watch those, and I remember it was Rocky 3 was the first one I'd watched in the theater. So ahead of that one, I remember it was such a big deal. I remember Rocky 4 being like a cultural event, like, everybody, your uncles and your cousins all got together to watch it and watched all the old ones leading up to that. And that was right around the time, of course, where boxing was still boxing in the 80s, Sugar Ray Leonard and Duran and Hagler and Hearns. So I'm not a diehard boxing fan when I'm 5, 6, 7 years old, but I know what's going on. When Hagler Hearns happened, that was a thing. With the build to Leonard Hearns in 1987 was the first time my non-sports watching father was like, we're gonna have a pay-per-view party and have the whole town over. Like, it was oh my God, and the controversial scorecards and all that. And that happened right at the same time of pro wrestling launching, when Vince McMahon took WWF at the time, launched WrestleMania in 1985. And I think being a Rocky movie cinematic fan, getting a taste of boxing, and then going hardcore right around the time of WrestleMania 1 and being a wrestling nerd, it kind of all played together perfectly. And I loved boxing. I doubled down on my interest in the early 90s when that big heavyweight boom came of age. Certainly everybody watched Tyson in the late 80s. He was the biggest athlete in sports. At times he was the biggest story in culture news. People still fail to realize that. It's like Bo Jackson, and for that 1 year, Michael Jordan and Mike Tyson. Like those guys were on the levels of like Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan for hot seconds there. When that took over into the early 90s, and you had Bo, you had Holyfield, you had Foreman, you had all that stuff, it was great. And then if you think about it, that's right around the time UFC launched. I've got an illegal black box that my dad bought, one of those cable boxes in the 90s that allow you to watch all the pay-per-views for free. So to have that access to everything going on in pro wrestling, boxing, and then the launch of UFC, which, I can vividly remember having parties at my house for UFC 3, 4, and 5, that first super fight between Gracie and Shamrock that went 36 minutes in a draw, my friends in high school falling asleep in the chair next to me. I remember all of that. I've been nuts for it since. I was that kid in high school who couldn't fight, but was always like, imagine if that guy fought that guy. And sometimes maybe unfortunately tried to get kids at middle school to fight each other just because, oh, there's a fight, let me sprint over there and see what it looks like. And it just all played together. And, I was a solid combat sports fan in the late 90s, early 2000s, but it was when I started boxing myself, not on like an amateur circuit, but just go to a gym with a friend and spar 3 nights a week. And you get a feel of, with headgear, with a mouthpiece, getting buzzed, getting dropped, you get a feel of what the science is, rather than I just want to see if this guy can knock out this guy. I went on a run of boxing runs. So this is the mid-2000s. I'm in my prime single days, right? In my 20s, the going out run. You're supposed to be at the club every Friday and Saturday night trying to find a wife. And I've got this illegal black box that was handed down to me. And it's 04, 05, 06, and I'm staying home every Saturday night watching every boxing pay-per-view. And it's weird at that point in my life. If you would have said, hey, dude, just, 8 years from now, you're going to be a national boxing writer and you're going to begin this career of being on TV talking about it. Like, are you kidding me? You know what I mean? Like, I'm in this crappy 3rd floor apartment, working this dead-end job, trying to find a wife, and staying home every Saturday to watch these boxing pay-per-view cards. And it was sort of like this sickness that I didn't know why I was going in that direction, but I could not stop. It's very similar to people getting hooked on heroin, I think, but let's not go deep into that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You were one of the leading boxing and MMA journalists. So how did it all come together? And let's actually go all the way back to your childhood. Like, I'm curious, was it something you were born with, or is it something in water you were drinking? That, hey, I was born in this place where everybody fights and then they go and write about it. I don't know, what's the story?
No, it's you know, I mean, I was a pretty smart kid in school. The one thing I took easily to was creative writing and like sports, and I would always write about sports in elementary school, middle school, so it became a thing that was easy for me. So I thought, if I'm taking, if I come from this factory town of Naugatuck, Connecticut, where, to be honest, people are hardworking, they love their local sports teams, but you're not necessarily thinking, what's my career plan for life? You're just sort of thinking, like, get a job, get a house, coach a local sports team, every life is good. And I'm thinking, I'll be a sports writer. It's the only thing I know. It's the only thing I do. There's an identity there in potentially being the local sports guy, and you show up at all the high school football games. And there's a culture there if you come from that background where it's like, it's intoxicating. You're never going to be – I come from an area where you're never going to be bigger than you are at age 17 if you're on the football team and you have a chance to win the Thanksgiving game against Ansonia. And that's the bottom line. Is that sad? Maybe, but that's the bottom line. So my idea throughout high school is just sort of like, I'm going to be a sports writer for the local paper, and that's great. I'll go to college. It's great. But there was always a deeper dream inside me. I was an insane sports fan throughout my entire youth, an insane memorizer of facts, statistics. Like, I'm talking like nerd level. Could sit down in high school in the cafeteria and for an hour have people try to stump me, and they couldn't. So it was really something that I didn't think was monetizable or career. I just thought it was something that this other kid down the street plays the guitar real well. That dude from one block up is amazing at basketball. Oh, that guy over there can fight anybody. That kid's only 10 and he smokes 2 packs a day. Everybody's got a skill. And I just thought that was, that guy over there just beat Mike Tyson's punch out in 2 seconds. Everyone could do something. I just thought, I memorized sports facts. What's the big deal? But I think deep inside myself, I knew that I had these dreams for more, these dreams to be a Sports Center anchor like any other kid in the 80s. I just didn't know that it was feasible. I didn't know how to get there. I thought it was the kind of thing where if you're going to do that, you've got to have that plan from like age 5. You've got to be getting ready. You've got to be lined up to go to the right college. You've got to be all these things. And I was just sort of that local dude living life, having fun, just saying, yeah, I'll write about high school football for the rest of my life. That's fine. That's wild. That's insane, but that's the reality. We crush a couple beer cans. That's what we do in my town, right?
And how did it all come together? Like, was it influenced for your parents? Maybe your dad told you, like, hey, if you get to this level, I'm going to be very proud of you, or something like that. Or, I don't know. I want to understand how is it this kid from with this some dreams deep inside, but really not opportunity, really, right?
Right.
Progressively get to where you currently are.
Well, I grew up 20 minutes from ESPN in Bristol, Connecticut. I grew up at a time in the 80s when Sports Center and ESPN, Chris Berman, the nicknames that gave rise to the early 90s with the personalities you saw in the air. It was everyone's dream to do anything at ESPN. So I'm the sports stat nerd. I'm thinking one day, dream job, ceiling job is to, not to be on the air, to just be in that building and doing nerd stats in the corner and say, look, I helped make that highlight. Like, that was legitimately my top end dream. And I was just sort of like, short of that, I'll cover youth sports for the newspaper. That's fine. I think my parents, that was good. I think there was a lot of people along the way who were like, man, why are you not going to broadcasting school? Why are you not going to ESPN? I worked at the grocery store, and the guys in the back every day were like, why are you sweeping floors in this grocery store? You should be out there, on Sports Center. And I'm just like, yeah, right, man. That's cool. That's great. It just sort of was, okay, that's Bryan Campbell. He's the sports nerd. Oh, he's our local sports writer. Oh, that makes a lot of sense too. Yeah. And it was just sort of, that's where it was. And I think everybody sort of accepted and was like, that's the natural path for him. So live life, enjoy.
That's crazy. You're sweeping floors?
I've done a lot of really insane things. Yes, throughout college and even into my early 20s, I was juggling jobs. I was the janitor at Stop and Shop, which is a insane chapter of my life. You want to talk about a lot of things I've touched and cleaned. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm thankful for where I come from in such a old school factory town blue collar, because I appreciate everything because I've fought for everything, and I've had this career that's akin to a NBA player who drops out of college, is not recruited highly, plays internationally in China, you know what I mean? Goes to the minor leagues and then somehow just shows up on a roster one day and fights his way to the top. And I don't know if I'm an overachiever or an underachiever sometimes, but I wouldn't change the journey because I grind, and I think that's when you're doing this because you love it, because you feel like you can't die before you accomplish what deep inside you're destined to accomplish. Then that's a power that just get everything else out of the way and keep following. It's like that huge light on the front of a train. Just let that thing go. And that was always there. It just took me a long time to realize it was possible. And I feel like if I ever people DM me or hit me up on LinkedIn, they're like, what do I do you're a great sports writer. What do I do to become a sports writer? I'm like, I can't give you a path because my journey is insane and everyone's journey is right place, right time, right person for a lot of degrees. But, you got to love it. You got to be willing to do it for no pay. You got to be willing to clean up puke at Stop and Shop if you have to juggle it. Like, you've got to grind to do it. And you can only get there if you love it, And do I complain about Las Vegas where I'm sitting right now that I'm here 10 times a year? Yeah, but, man, when it's fight night, when it's fight night, woo, right? Rick Flair you there. Let's that get me fired up for this.
That's an inspirational. So you went through high school. You already were writing the covering sport for local teams, right? Well, then you enter in college. And what did you study, and why did you choose that particular college? And
I went to community college for a couple of years. It was a phys ed major for a year. I don't know where it was. I thought I was just going to be some gym teacher coaching youth sports or something. I changed to journalism. I've got decent jobs at a couple different local newspapers, writing about high school sports, all that stuff. It just seemed natural. I'm a commuter college student. I'm paying my own way. It just seemed natural. Hey, all right, I'll finish out school. I'll get a job at a higher local paper, and that's my life, and that's great, and that's an honest living, and I love it. I love me some high school football. I mean, there's something there. I love it. But, you go through your college years. I think paying my own way gave me this chip on my shoulder that maybe didn't push me. You would think if you're paying your own way, you'll push yourself even harder. To me, it was almost like, well, I got to pay my own way so I can control the shots. I stopped trying as much. When I transferred to Southern Connecticut State University, I was on a road to get a journalism degree. And I think I just hit that wall that a lot of, late teens hit. That's sort of like, I don't want to do this anymore. Yet my career is kind of taken off. And it got to a point where I'm like, I'm studying to get this degree while I'm juggling 2-3 jobs for a full-time job that I feel like I can already get right now if I really wanted it. So I made that short-sighted decision of dropping out of school, partying a lot, not paying for it myself anymore. And then eventually I did land, the kind of full-time writing jobs. The problem sort of is, they're inevitably entry level and dead endish. And, you begin to sort of quickly realize like this small-minded dream of just doing this, like maybe I'm meant for more, So I bounced around full-time jobs, local newspapers for a bunch of years. In the end, though, got really important experience that I think, by the time I was able to get to an ESPN, by the time I was able to take a chance on writing a story at that level, I sort of had this experience that, life is an experience, and that's so cliche and stupid, but I don't care if you drop out of college and go backpack in Amsterdam and get high every day. There's something inevitably there about that period of time that helps build the foundation for who you are and where you're going. So I wouldn't trade my 20s living in a crappy apartment, working for a crappy newspaper, making no money and wishing I was more. But if I didn't spend those years underachieving to build that hunger, you wouldn't see me here today. I'd be selling insurance and probably have a wife and kids and everything be nice, and I'd be mowing my lawn on the weekends. But would I be happy? Would I be passionate? Would I be doing something I care about? Would I do this job for free? You're damn right I would, all right?
So how did you get to ESPN then? And I'm curious, about to hear what led to that, and as soon as you got that offer, I want to know who you called first and what.
Yeah, so ESPN became the impossible dream in my 20s. I was so close, living 20 miles or 12 miles away, yet so far away. Didn't have a degree, was a local sports writer, but who the heck am I, right? Everyone and their mother is telling me, what's your plans for your career? I don't really have any. To be honest with you, like, why are you not on SportsCenter already, right? It was this like recurring thing that sort of happened, and I'm just like, you don't get it. I think I was of this belief that I was an underachiever. I was okay with that. I was the small town guy. And to get to a level of achievement, I thought it was a road that had so many hurdles. Now, inevitably, the road to get there is actually longer than I thought. What I didn't realize is that in life, I don't care whether I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, I'm a Christian. I don't care where your belief system comes from. You get to a certain point. Sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom to get there, where you're just like, I don't care anymore. I'm going to walk in the direction of my dreams. And as long as I keep walking, I'm going to get there. As long as I keep walking, the road will take me there. That's inevitably what happened to me. But I had the same paralyzing fear, I think, in my 20s that a lot of people have. That's like, I could have been. I should have been. Right? I should have tried out for the Yankees when I was 18. I should have never quit that rock band. I shouldn't have dropped out of college. I should have been all these things. I was so lost and scared of the idea of how do you get there? What do I have to go back to school? Do I have to do this? Do I have to intern here? It's so sort of, I think for a lot of people, it's just sort of overwhelming. And I look back now, was I suffering from anxiety and depression during a time when people weren't talking about that? I would say absolutely I was. My 20s hit that quarter life crisis, rock bottom feeling. For 2 years, I actually got out of writing. I was working at a local factory. I was 27 years old, working at a local factory for peanuts, rebuilding my work ethic, trying to get serious about my life. Dead-end apartment, dead-end job, girlfriend breaks up with you. It really was sort of that dark moment. What the hell are you going to do with your life? I want to rock. No, sorry. That was a music video. I'm thankful that I was able to hit a life rock bottom. Excess, partying, disappointment, underachievement, all this stuff, because when you hit that wall and you don't go down and you get back up, and I got back up with a personal sort of salvation, finding God and realizing that there's this other way to live life, and that's all great and stuff, and it changed my life. But it also woke me up and said, all right, what do I really want to do? What am I supposed to be doing? What is that voice deep inside actually telling me that I normally like stiff arm away or drink a couple extra Coors Lights to try to keep that voice away? No, that voice is saying you can do this. And even those first couple of years, I never, ever, ever would have guessed I'm here right now. You have to understand this. If you would have told me at 27 or at 25 when I started to take life seriously, and at 27 when things really started to open up, that if you just said, hey, your future is to work the third shift at ESPN and compile stats, I would have said, I made it. I put the train back on the tracks, right? I applied to ESPN finally, shot in the dark. Like a lot of people, you throw your resume over there and it falls into a pile of 20,000. Only the other resumes have like Stanford educations or Notre Dame or whatever, and they all did interns at this station. I knew what I was up against. I was able to get a call back for a part-time project, really crappy position. I'm working a full-time job at a factory every morning at 6 a.m. and I get this part-time opportunity a couple nights a week to work till like 2 a.m., kind of compiling stats, doing whatever. Did it feel like I made it? Yes. That initial dream, called my parents right away. You better believe that. It probably felt to a lot of people that I probably finally grabbed that lifeline and was going in the direction of my dreams. Here's what's crazy. Went and worked a couple times. I'm working until 2 a.m. Got to get up at 6 a.m. for my real job to pay rent. And I just got to a point that very quickly I'm like, this isn't it. This, like, am I going to walk away from my dream? It's a part-time project position for peanuts, working crap, working second shift. No one cares about it. It could be a key in there. I don't know. And I walked away from it. I walked away from it knowing this isn't working. I can't juggle both right now. And I said, and I made one of those bold decisions that, like, If it's meant to be, it'll come back. You know, like your mom tells you after somebody breaks your heart, you know, like, you know, if she'll come back if it's meant to be. And I'm really lucky what played out. It was like 6 months later from me working those couple days or weeks on that job. They still had my resume. Temp agency calls me up to go, hey, we got this thing at ESPN. They're launching the cell phone, ESPN Mobile, the phone. They're like, we need some people to work a project position. We saw your resume. It may work. So I accept it. It's a night shift, but it's not overnight. I go there, and it's the crappiest job ever. It pays nothing. There's a set time when it's going to end, and you're not going to work there anymore. You're not working for ESPN. You're working for a temp agency. But I was like, this is more manageable. This is the time it's supposed to happen. And I just went for it. I had a boss in New York who didn't talk to me. I knew that I was going to get let go at the end of it because I'm doing nothing. So I just kept sniffing and elbowing around this department. What's going on over here? How can I help here? This department. How can I help here? This department. And I really started to go after it. What was I going after? I don't know. I was going away, right? From living in that third floor apartment. I was going after something. I just kept going though. And eventually I got hired full time. And eventually 2 years later, I finally get benefits. And I'm not a temp anymore. And eventually whatever. So I'm working at ESPN and it's cool. And I get married, I've got kids, and I'm working a really demanding second shift job. I'm an editor of the mobile phone. I'm like a, web editor and all this stuff. And I'm writing headlines and it's great. I've been there 5-6 years, but there's that itch again of like, you should be doing more. And I'm the fight guy. I love boxing. I love MMA. Hey, you got a question? Go to the fight guy. The fight guy is over there. And I'm the guy that walk in at night and there's 18 TVs on the wall. I'm like, guys, I know all you want to do is watch the NBA playoffs or watch the Wimbledon or watch something. But tonight in Mexico, there's this insane fight. You got to understand this guy, and he's crazy. He just got out of jail and he's going up against this guy. And people would be like, yeah, man, that's great. And I don't know, but I just kept being boxing hardcore. And I'm working second shift and I'm not seeing my family and I'm getting home at 2-3 a.m. and I'm lucky to see my kids a couple hours, but I'm grinding and I'm not making any money, but I know I'm going somewhere. And one day my boss takes me into his office and he goes, all right, you've been here a while. What do you want to do with your career though? I'm like, I want to write about boxing. I love boxing. I am boxing. All right. I'm going to write about boxing. And he laughed at me. And this is one of those, if they're going to make a movie about my life, right? This is one of those moments, right? And he goes, if you would have picked any other sport, I could make a phone call. I could run a favor for you up the chain. I could get you to an NBA game to write a story. I could do anything. You want to cover boxing? You want to cover this dead ass sport? He goes, how many people right now cover boxing full time for a living and make a comfortable living at it to support a family like you or your family man? How many? I go, 2. Maybe 2.5, right? Well, there's that other guy, but he also covers these other 3 sports, He goes, yeah, exactly. Good luck to you. And I looked him in the eye, and I'm like, can't pick what you love. I love this insane game. I love this broken down, dirty red light district sport. I'm coming. I think you hear me knocking. I think I'm coming in. And I'm just like, I'm going forward. And it's crazy is from that conversation on, I started contributing stories to ESPN.com, even though I wasn't working for them. Suddenly, these stories are getting pushed out there. I write this column on Mike Tyson going in the Hall of Fame in 2011. It gets to him. He calls me at home to thank me for the words I said. Like, insanity starts happening.
You lose your mind probably when, hey, this is Mike Tyson.
It's insane. I'm going to fights. I'm covering them, and I'm just like, pour it on me. This is where I belong. This is where I need to be. But again, even in those moments, it's sort of like I never had the right vision. And maybe now I still don't. But I knew I'm going that way. I know I'm going there. And I know that. And it's like you have this moment where you look in the mirror and you say, like, I'm just going to believe. I'm just going to have faith. What's the word faith mean? It means believing in what you can't see. I'm just going to have faith, whether it's through God, whether it's through that hard work gets rewarded. I'm going to have faith that I'm going to go down this crazy road and something's going to be there at the end of it. And I worked 11 years at ESPN. In the first 7 or 8, I worked the worst hours ever for really demanding people. But I grinded and I got opportunities. And there were times even when my boxing career started to take off in 2013, 2014, where I'm hosting this boxing web show and interview show. I'm showing up on Friday Night Fights as a contributor. I'm doing sideline reporting on Friday Night Fights. And yet I'm a general editor for ESPN.com, like the backup MMA and boxing editor, not making a salary that could not support a family of four. Can't pay my heat, can barely pay my rent of the house I'm renting, and yet I'm like on TV. Like, it's mind boggling.
It is.
And it was this journey that I got so many breaks, so many people helped me out. I got so lucky so many random times, and yet I didn't get paid. I did it all for free. I did it all for the nookie, right? So I did it all for the experience, for the dream, for the content, and I did it for the right reasons. And I think it built something in me that is irreplaceable. It's an appreciation of everything, and it's a hard work to have gotten there. And when I talk about doors opening, like, I'm a big pro wrestling fan. I'm walking in 2014 and there happens in my desk to be a suit and tie, just in case somebody wants me to go on and talk about boxing. And somebody goes, hey, the Ultimate Warrior just died. No one cares about this. You know wrestling, right? You want to go do this? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I put on the suit and tie. I'm interviewing Triple H about the death of the Ultimate Warrior. Turns out the only interview he's doing on camera, it's getting spread millions around the world. And that same boss, by the way, calls me into his office and goes, what are you doing? What do you think, you're going to be ESPN's pro wrestling writer one day? And I was like, maybe I will. How about that? Maybe I will. And 2.5 years later, in almost unprecedented fashion, after me knocking on the door of the head of ESPN.com's office over and over again, they launched a pro wrestling page and made me the lead writer. And it's crazy. And, in all this time, I'm not getting paid. My wife is like, what are we doing here? We're not, but you put that investment in the bank, you get those reps, you just say, I'm going to get there in the end. And it's no different than a fighter, training every day. He doesn't see the money that he thinks he's going to make one day or the glory, but he knows it's out there. And I've had so many people go to bat, Todd Grisham giving me a chance, John Anik, the great John Anik, the voice of the UFC?
Yes, of course.
I worked next to him at ESPN. He'd always tell me in my ear, dude, why are you not doing more? Why are you not writing about boxing full time? Why are you not on camera at ESPN? Nobody knows more boxing than you. Nobody gets us fired up for it. And I say, John, you don't understand, man. You don't understand. I'm just this guy. Like, I'm behind the scenes guy. It's all good. And one day he comes up to me. He goes, look, Bernard Hopkins is my favorite boxer ever. I go, yeah, you love Bernard Hopkins. He goes, I've got an interview in person today with Bernard Hopkins upstairs on the set. I can go to my boss and tell them that you need to do it. And, there's moments in life when, like, the strings are playing and the cello and the heavens open up. And I didn't actually accept it. I was like, John, I love you. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever tried to do for me. I cannot do this. I am not ready, but thank you. But that moment was one of those, like, aha, and the door opens up. And I said to myself, if John Anik knows I can do this, and there's been 50 of those moments, just so you know, I'm not the guy that, like, had it all mapped out and had it all, but I'm the guy who didn't stop coming forward. All right. I'm the guy who didn't stop getting up, and it's all possible. And I'm not trying to Tony Robbins you here, but it's all possible.
Well, I mean, that's a real thing. I'm not sure about Tony Robbins. I don't trust the guy, but, I mean, that's fantastic. So at what point though, ESPN finally said, hey, look, all these years, we did not realize how freaking valuable you are to the company. Now, take everything. What do you want to just stay? Did they ever say that? Or CBS just came and said, hey, let's go?
I don't have anything bad to say about ESPN, but unfortunately, it's such a big company, to be really honest with you, that
of course, Disney, all this stuff, yeah.
A niche sport like boxing it can fall through the cracks. You can be doing great work on boxing and MMA, and that was a time where they didn't have rights in boxing and MMA, so it wasn't a priority for them, and really people wouldn't know it, to be really honest with you. And at the same time, they say catcher is the quickest way to the majors in Major League Baseball. A niche sport is the quickest way to get a chance, right? I was able to get opportunities and be considered a national voice when I'm making no money and don't really have that title so much earlier, because if this was the NFL or NBA, it would have been harder to climb that ladder. And I understood that coming in, but I certainly used that to my advantage. I don't think there was ever a point where ESPN was like, this guy's going somewhere, this guy's the future. But at the same time, I'm going to be honest with you, if you go back and look at my work, it was encouraging, but it may not have screamed where I am now. But what happened was I fought for opportunities that weren't there. Like, they told me, we'll never add another editing position to the boxing and MMA team. And then a year later, I wouldn't stop pushing for it, and they created a position for me. So I'm saying, like, I continued to go to the bat for myself. I was named the MMA editor, and they said, you can't cover boxing anymore. And then I switched bosses, and it was this chaotic situation. And then the new boss goes, hey, we're going to send you out on the road to the next 5 UFC events, and you're going to be our columnist. And it's just sort of like, I almost wanted to raise my hand and be like, I'm probably not qualified for this opportunity. But it's sort of like, if you get ready, the phone will ring in your life, right? If you show up at that gym every single day, eventually the pounds will come off, right? Like whatever it is you're thinking about. And the opportunities came, and I dove right in. And it's insane to me that some of those same years that I was on TV for ESPN, and people probably assumed I'm making $500,000, I was unable to pay rent. I was unable to, I was eligible for basically the equivalent of like welfare in my town, or the food bank in my town. And it was humbling, and it's crazy, but it builds that foundation,
I think it's also build up foundation of your family. The fact that your family was willing to take it, like, it's probably, I'm pretty sure there are many partners who'll be like, hey dude, what the hell, we have 2 kids. I understand.
Well, there's another story in there. So my kids were born in 2008. I have twin sons, and they were born 4.5 months premature, and it was 6 months after we got married. And one was just over 1 pound, another one was 2 pounds, and they weren't given a chance to live. And one was in the hospital for almost a full year. The other one was in a separate hospital in a separate state for 4 months. They each had 6 major surgeries the first year. And specifically, one of my sons had like 3 legitimate medical miracles in that first year, where the doctors are like, I'm sorry, he's going to die. We've done everything we can. And you have these moments where you're in this tiny room where you get the bad news. And I've had these moments where I don't know where the voice came from, but a doctor would sit you down and say, I'm sorry, we've done everything we can. Your son's not going to make it. And I would just wide eye and go, not my son. We'll figure it out. He's going to make it. He's going to make it. And there were moments where body parts grew back, and we had people praying around the globe. And was it a miracle? Was it God's hand? I don't know. But I went through a lot, and my kids are lucky to be here, and they're incredible, and they're amazing. And we had 2 years of hell, and we almost lost them so many times. But I think that was part of building that resolve in the entire family. And I know that was a turning point moment in my career, because I came out of that 2-year journey of where I'm still working, but I'm kind of putting my dreams on hold just to survive each day. And I looked at my kids, and they fought through insane surgeries. They had, like I mentioned, they had body parts grow back it wasn't possible that it could happen. And on the inside, and I started to say, like, they're fighting to live. Like they're fighting just to live. Like, why am I not fighting to be everything that God's blessed me with? And there were some moments there. There were some long nights, and there were some moments where you start to ask yourself those questions. Like I know that I'm not saying this is happening for a reason, but this is happening, and I can and should use this as inspiration to change the way I'm living life and change the way I'm going after. And since those times, man, right place, right time, good luck, hardworking guy, maybe. I've also had a lot of divine doors open for me, and I've kicked them right down. And it's been an incredible ride. Man,
holy shit. Have you told this story anywhere else? Because a
couple smaller places, never really too crazy. It's pretty wacky. It's pretty wild. It'll test your level of belief in a lot of things. But it's a great story that unfortunately doesn't happen to everyone. We've seen so many, when my kids were in the hospital, so many other kids pass away and didn't get the same insane story. I don't know why, my family was chosen, but I'll tell you what, I'm not going to stop telling it, because I really, feel like I was given a gift by going through all that.
Man, congratulations. I'm really happy for you. And I don't know how we go back to sports after this.
Oh, it's easy. Just segue right in there.
Okay, let's just segue. No, so CBS came in. How did they show up in your life?
My boss at CBS Sports, Kieran Portley, just happened to be my original ESPN boss. Uh-huh. So there was talk for a while when him and my other original ESPN boss, the late Anthony Mormile, went to CBS eventually, like, hey, down the road, maybe there would be an opportunity. But, you know, that would have probably been more of an editor role / boxing writer. It really wasn't my last couple of years at until my last couple of years at ESPN, 2015, 2016, the early part of 2017, that I was diversifying into being a MMA, boxing, and pro wrestling writer. And it's sort of rare even today. There's very few guys who are doing all three and doing all three on this level. So I think I was able to increase my brand considerably. I was hosting podcasts in all three different sports at ESPN. I was doing everything I ever dreamed of. I was doing TV. I was doing all this great stuff. The only thing I wasn't doing was getting paid. And, so it was some crazy journeys there. But, you know, things happen in time for a reason. I worked an insane amount my last 2 years at ESPN and was only able to really afford life through the overtime I put in. The same day that I was told we can't do overtime anymore was the same day I was supposed to sign a lease to buy my first house at age 39, an impossible dream to have finally afford your house after having literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical debt, you know, on year one of my marriage because of my kids, you know, a long journey to get there. And I can't sign this lease for this house because ESPN's saying I can't guarantee you overtime, and the mortgage people are saying, well, if you can't guarantee you can make this salary this year, you can't buy this house. And I remember for like 2 hours, it was like, man, the world's crushed. The world's falling on me right now. And ESPN for like the fourth straight year had sort of been like, can't give you the promotion that you deserve now, but if you wait another X amount of cycles, it may come around. And that same day, Kieran Portley of CBS Sports called me. And he had talked to me 6 months earlier, a year earlier, and said, hey, a year from now, we may be doing something. But you get to know in this business that even if it's somebody you know, until the contract is there, you don't have anything, right? I've been linked to a lot of projects in this past year that never came about. But he called me on that same day and said, we're ready. I'll have an offer for you at the end of this day. We want you to be our full-time MMA, boxing, and pro wrestling writer. We're going to give you a kick-ass salary. You can move to Fort Lauderdale if you want, or you can stay in Connecticut and work out of your house. We're going to build a studio in your basement. You're going to be our fight analyst on CBS Sports HQ, our live streaming network that's going to launch in less than a year. We're going to give you your own podcast for each sport and have a different episode every day. What else do you need? And, you know, it was an amazing moment in my life and career. And, it was hard to unplug from the ESPN machine because you have to understand, like, you know, I grew up in the shadows of it. That was the impossible dream. And I had achieved that dream, and I had achieved things that I never, ever, ever thought was possible. And now I'm giving that up to go sign a 1-year contract with a 1-year option and take a chance, you know, and I bet on myself. And it's insane what has happened since then. And I don't know how long I might be keeping you here talking too long about my life, but can I tell you a crazy story?
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, I want to hear everything.
All right. So I started working at CBS Sports in 2017. It's going good. But for the first time in my life, I'm working out of my house. For 12, almost 13 years, I worked at ESPN at the office every day. When you walk around the campus of ESPN, it's like being in sports heaven, right? You go to the cafeteria, you run into all these ex-athletes and celebrities. You walk around this campus, it's like a giant college campus. There's a bus that takes you around. You know everybody. Hey, how you doing? Now for a full year through a particularly rough winter, I'm in my basement in my pajamas writing every day, right? Like I'm doing video hits, I'm doing podcasts, but I realized this working from home thing's kind of hard. And I think I got really depressed in a weird way. And I'm suddenly like, this is everything I thought I ever wanted. For the past 5 years, every single day I woke up ready to crawl and scratch and just get that full-time job that I knew I deserved, that recognition that I had made it, right? That I'm good enough for this, not good enough to go get a tryout here or a sample here or whatever, or we'll use you but not pay you here. No, you're good enough for this. And I didn't want it. I didn't like it. It was just weird. So you transform to the next spring. I don't know if you know Mauro Ranallo, the Combat Sports announcer, very well.
I'm sorry, who is?
Mauro Ranallo, the bipolar rock and roller. He's the voice of Bellator MMA and the
okay, yes,
voice of Showtime Boxing and also WWE. Showtime put out a documentary on his mental health journey called Bipolar Rock and Roller. Had him on my podcast to sort of talk about it. He breaks down in tears talking about his mental health journey. around that same time, I had a really close friend who tried to take his own life, and it really hurt me bad. There were members of my family that sort of walked out their own mental health journeys that I hadn't known about. That was really hard. And Morwen Howell said this thing on my podcast that like haunted me. He was like, you know, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay in this macho world to say, I might not have it all together right now. And a couple months later, it was the premiere of his documentary. So for the whole day before that, I spent a day with him in New York City, followed him around, interviewed a bunch of times, watched him get interviewed by others, did a full 5,000 words, feature on it. And while I'm writing it, those words are just haunting me. And I'm like, he's talking to me. I know he's talking to me. Like, he's talking to everybody. He's trying to inspire everybody. But you know what? Like, I'm not okay. And really, maybe I've never been okay. Maybe I've always been fighting anxiety and depression and not realizing, not getting out of my own way, not realizing my own goals and dreams. You know, maybe me, who feels like he has it all together, doesn't, and it's okay. And I went and saw a doctor. I ended up getting put on low dose medication for anxiety. And it was a really hard 3 months that followed, a lot of questioning as the medicine sort of helps you figure it out. But once I sort of leveled out, this was July of 2018. I turned 40, went away with my family that weekend in Vermont, stayed at this farmhouse up in the woods. And that weekend, for whatever reason, I leveled out. I woke up the next morning. I was 40 years old, and I said, I got a clear head. Like, I can do this. Everything's good. I can do this. And the next 3 to 6 months to 9 months to a year, however you want to map this out, the phone did not stop ringing. And I think the reason is, and suddenly Fox is like, do you want to host this national interview boxing show? Yeah. MMA fighting is like, do you want to be a panelist on our weekly show? Showtime Boxing is like, hey, do you want to come work our weigh-in desk with Paulie Malignaggi and Morwen Howell? Like what? And I know what happened, because I went back and watched a lot of the on-air hits I did immediately after that. I, like a lot of people, was my biggest critic. I would fear opportunities to be on camera because I so badly wanted to hit a home run and dominate it, that I would be in my head the whole time, and then certainly be in my head for the hours afterwards, watching it over and over and critiquing myself. And it was just sort of living in this state of negativity and sort of this whole, like, I want to get myself to a level where I'm good enough. And when your focus is only on being good enough, you're inevitably underselling yourself, right? You're saying, I just don't want to get found out, right? I just want to be good enough where I'm accepted. And I started to realize, like, I'm doing a bad Jim Lampley impression. Shout out to Jim Lampley, HBO Boxing, one of the best voices in fight history. I'm doing a poor man's Jim Lampley impression on the air. I'm trying to be this prim and proper newsman or this whatever, and it's not who I am. And I thought back to 2 instances at ESPN, back when I first started being on camera, where everybody's like, hey, dude, you're doing great, man. I remember working overnights with you, and now you're on camera. You're doing great. Most people had the kind of reaction that your parents would say. Oh, my God, you're doing awesome. Great. Keep it up. But there was a couple guys who were brave enough to come up to me and go, hey, dude, congrats on everything. But I saw you on Friday Night Fights the other night, and you looked a little nervous, and that wasn't you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They go, you know the guy that comes into the newsroom and he's fired up and he's out of control and he's like, you got to see this fight, and here's why. They go, like, why can't you be that guy on camera? And I remember in those moments thinking, like, dude, you don't understand. You understand how hard and scary this is. You understand when that red light goes on, man. Like, it's crazy. You just don't get it. These people just don't get it. And it was weird. After I sort of leveled out and came to terms with some things, I realized that care was gone. That fear was gone. The anxiety was gone. Suddenly, when that red light turned on, I wasn't trying to be good enough. I wasn't trying to be a poor man's Jim Lampley. I was actually trying to be either the best I could be, or I just didn't care. Or I just said, you know what, this is my job, and I'm pretty good at it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Here we go. And, man, the phone started ringing. And I don't say that to brag, but I say that because I got out of my own way, and I came to terms with something in my life that had been a problem. And, you know, it still challenges me to this day. And I don't think have any kind of clinical label, but I've battled seasonal depression and some things that a lot of regular citizens do, but I've come to terms with it. And I am free, and I'm free on air. And I've never had more fun in my life. And I probably say inappropriate words on air too often, but I'm out here to show you that combat sports is really friggin' fun, and it gets me fired the heck up. And if you like it too, Like, let's have a relationship. Me on this end of the camera, you on the other, and we're gonna get fired up about this because this is awesome.
Man, that's crazy. That's
I was crazy for a while. Yeah, you're right.
That's not what I meant, but yeah. Man. So what's really changing? Is it the fact that combat sports are gaining popularity again, that there is so much demand and there is no one else who can cover it as well as you? And because one thing that the reason I like to watch you is just because what you explained. I could never imagine you have depressions. I mean, it's not about this guy. This guy is hilarious. A lot of your jokes go over my head, so I only catch them when I read the comments. And did you hear like that? Oh shit! Yeah, that's that. So what's really happening in there? Is the industry changing? Is it your MMA gaining popularity or boxing improving? What's WWE maybe?
I think it's a combination of things. I think right now, specifically, I'm benefiting from changes in TV and presentation where live sports is king in this DVR unplugging, cord cutting era. Live sports is the only non-DVRable thing. So it's not that boxing or MMA is any better or more exciting than it was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. But it's all about the presentation and distribution. We always said this when 2011 in boxing, when there was 13 pay-per-views that year and you got to subscribe to Showtime and boxing and buy all the pay-per-views, and it almost makes it impossible to be a boxing fan, right? You got to be so hardcore and pay all this money. I think that boxing in MMA to a certain degree is cheap programming for the big networks. You know, why is DAZN coming in and throwing so much money at boxing? It was like, because you don't have to sign a whole league. You can get a promoter and you can do some things. That's helped open some doors for me. There's a lot of great opportunities. But I think simultaneously, I've figured out how to be real. And it's weird. I didn't, you know, I don't try to be a certain type of broadcaster. I just try to be me now, and whatever happens, happens, and whatever jobs come and go. But I'm realizing that I always clung to the people that were real. I love me some Teddy Atlas. Was he batshit crazy on the year? Yes. But he tells his own version of the truth. I always love me some Dick Vitale, some early prime Chris Berman, guys who would just come out there and be themselves. I was a sports writer for a long time, still am. When Bill Simmons came on the scene and suddenly wasn't doing the prim and proper thing, was doing the, hey, I'm Johnny's super fan. So if you like that, come read my stuff. I think there's been some subtle change throughout the years in the business where it doesn't have to, especially in boxing and MMA, it doesn't have to be prim and proper, wear a tuxedo to the broadcast anymore. It can be like, is this life or death inside the cage? Yes. But is this in general life or death? No, it's entertainment. It's a sport. It's basically real pro wrestling. It's a sport. It's fun. Let's talk about that. Let's get excited about that. So it's a perfect storm this calendar year. In this past calendar year, I've been getting insane opportunities. It's been amazing. The business is hot right now. Boxing is back in a lot of ways. I don't know if it'll last. You'll see if they can keep putting on great fights and getting big ratings. But it's been amazing. It's been absolutely fantastic. I'm blessed to be able to do that across 3 sports. I love some pro wrestling. I go to WrestleMania every year and cover. Like, I mean, I'm able to do things that I just never would have guessed were imaginable and possible, and do them as a job. And it's wild because, you know, I do 3 podcasts a week for CBS Sports, 1 video podcast for Showtime every Monday, and I would be having those same 4 separate 2-hour conversations in my life elsewhere, right? Or on Twitter with, you know, like my wife's always telling me, she's always like, look, you know, in your old age, you're really bad at making friends. In our town, you know a couple dads from the soccer games or whatever, but you're just not good. But you're always talking to these fake imaginary internet friends. And I'm like, they ain't fake. They're like-minded people who get me, okay? And that's the deal. And unfortunately, I grew up in an area where I was the only boxing fan. I didn't have anybody to talk to back in the day. Now the world can get smaller, and I can talk to my peeps about this. So, yeah, I'll be doing this anyway. I love this game.
So one of your later projects is Morning Kombat with Luke Thomas. How did you guys meet, and who came up with the idea? And by the way, who is that person who always tell you to move on? Like, tell
that's Jay Aaron, our producer.
Read the comments. It's the most popular comment. No, it's the second most popular comment.
Yes, FJ is Jay loves it, by the way. Jason Aaron, he's a director in his free time. If you're a big Back to the Future nut, he's got a documentary out there, I believe, on Hulu about Back to the Future called Back in Time. That's fantastic. But he's our producer in our era, always trying to speed us up, always making trouble. But Luke Thomas and I have known each other since 2013. We covered Mayweather, Canelo, met each other. So I said, hey, I like your work. I've seen you on TV, whatever. Stayed decently friendly, not too close though. And it wasn't until summer of 2018, he was taking over the MMA beat after Ariel Helwani left for ESPN. It's not always easy to find credible people based in New York to come on that show. Chuck Mindenhall, my good friend who was also on that show, kind of was like, hey, Luke, you ever think about Bryan Campbell? They gave me a tryout. You hear about my life timing. It was perfect timing for me to just come on there and be like, this gig fell in my hands. There's some decent money at stake, but this gig fell in my hands. Let me just be me, right? Let me just turn on the cameras and be me. And I think that worked with Luke because he's such a overbearing personality, a firm believer in black and white in certain topics, and can be intimidating to certain other panelists where, I just come in there with the attitude like, I'm going to try to pop you with a joke. I got some analysis too, but I'm going to try to pop you with a joke. And I'm not going to be afraid to swing back at you. And I think that, the viewers started to realize there's something there. We didn't really talk about it at length, but there was I think both Luke and I, if you asked us separately, would say, how did Morning Combat come together? I think both of us would probably claim some degree of credit. There was a conversation I had early on with Luke where he was opening up and saying, look, I'm blessed to have this MMA beat and MMA hour opportunity after Ariel left, but it's really not my shows. It's sort of someone else's show that I'm shepherding. He's like, I'd love to do something that's more me. And I go, you know what you need? You need a PTI MMA version where it's you and an eccentric personality, somebody who won't back down, can just have fun with this and argue and go back and forth. But I wasn't saying that to sort of subtly pitch myself. I was actually thinking more of Brendan Schaub, who I know Luke is close with, who at the time was launching his own video podcast with Showtime that he still has to this day. And Luke said, that could work, whatever. And I'll give Luke credit. I don't know if that planted a seed, but a certain amount of months later, after doing that show for a while, he confided in me that his contract would be coming up. He didn't know if he was going to stay. He didn't know what opportunities would be out there. But would I be interested in some kind of two-man show where we can really do this thing and we can chop it up and we can have fun, we can argue, we can do all these things. And 100% I was all in. It's really, really, really rare in this game of podcasting or doing video podcasting when you find that match, you find that dance partner who has that kind of chemistry with you. I've done a lot of podcasts with people that I click with, people I don't click with, people that I've made it work, people that we just kind of coexist. And I used to do a really popular podcast for ESPN called Cheapy on pro wrestling with the great Peter Rosenberg. A lot of people know his work in the hip hop area and also on ESPN New York radio. And that was one of the guys where from the moment we turned the microphones on, I'm like, this works. My boy Rafe Bartholomew, who I used to do a boxing podcast with on Grantland, and we've taken that to CBS Sports, is one of those guys. Luke was one of those guys. It was a little bit more adversarial, but it worked. And there was some talk at some point about doing that show with MMA fighting. And then eventually we landed with Showtime, and we got an insanely great offer and some ownership on the show in terms of, creativity and all that. And I think we've put together something that is so special because it's effortless. It's fun. We care about it a lot. We think about it a lot. We try to improve it and make it the best it can be, but it's effortless for us to go out there and turn on the microphones and roll out the balls and just speak. And I think it's, people like the humor. They love the arguing. Luke is actually a really funny dude. I know some people just don't he's a really quick-witted, funny dude. And you could even take that though. You could take the humor and put it aside. It's gaga BS, and I love that stuff. That's why I bring it to the table. But I think at the end of the day, we're real, and I got a first taste of that on that MMA beat, and I love the MMA beat. I love the chance I had on that show where I felt I could be more real on that show with because as journalists, we kind of all go through this. There's the journalism opinion that you're allowed to say on camera because I don't really want to offend this guy. And my company I'm working for has stakes in this company, so I can't really go too far on this end. And we all played that game. But then when the camera's off and it's one of our boys texting us or DMing, or one of my fake friends, as my wife would say, I'm like, no, that guy sucks, or that guy's washed, or that network made a horrible decision. And I think I sort of came to a point where I have a lot more freedom at CBS Sports than I did at ESPN to say what I feel, to maybe even sometimes crack some jokes that go too far. But I started to realize that nobody's real. Nobody's real in this fight game anymore. And the fight sports are the realest of the real sports. It's like nobody's real. And I hope that we're able to bring a refreshing level of we're going to say it. You know, a fighter stunk, we're going to say it. A promotion made a bad decision, we're going to say it. And it wasn't like we calculated that in the beginning and said, let's make this our MO, but I think it just kind of all came together. It works. We got a great team there with Malka Sports, company that works hand in hand with Showtime. And I think that some of the changes that people have seen and have liked, we're only going to keep going in that direction. We're going to take the show on the road, down the road, if we continue to bring these numbers. And I couldn't be more excited. And I'm not going to lie to you. I thought of this as like, oh, this is one thing I do one day for an hour and a half. Like, oh, I play basketball on Tuesday nights with the old guys. I do this on this night. This is just one thing I do, and it's really fun. And I think the fact that I'm not stressing over it and trying to make it be this great thing that'll boost my career is part of what's making it really special.
Yeah, that's hopefully you guys continue doing that show because it is a lot of fun. So let's end this interview with the quick blitz that I typically have with my guests. So we're gonna ask you a quick question and give me a quick answer. Okay. So what's your favorite movie?
My favorite movie is the great buddy film Beautiful Girls that came out in 1995. It's kind of a forgotten movie, even though it's got big stars in Timothy Hutton, Rosie O'Donnell, Uma Thurman. It's that, you know what movie it is? It's that movie about coming back to your hometown for your 10-year high school anniversary and seeing how everybody's changed. And I almost feel like if you watch that movie, you can identify with every single guy in that friend group. I was that guy during these years. I was that guy during these years. And it's just such a smart movie about love, relationships, and coming to terms with who you are in your life, which is, you know, mirrored my journey.
Does it have any fighting in it? No fighting?
There's a little bit. There's some fist fighting. There's some bar fist fighting. Matthew, what's the dude from Matt Dillon, right? Yeah, Matt Dillon. He gets his ass kicked out in the back. So yeah, there's some.
Oh, good. He deserved it. What's your favorite song?
My favorite song is Blue Sky by the Allman Brothers. I'm a giant Dickie Betts, the former guitar player for their fan. I think that's the most melodic guitar solo I've ever heard. It's a beautiful song. I've always loved the theme of it, but there's a 3 to 4 minute guitar solo in the middle of that, which for a mainstream radio hit, it's pretty incredible. And it's just, it's the most beautiful piece of art. And believe me, I'm a big time rock and roll, classic rock fan and all that, but that song really just does it for me.
Your favorite book?
I'm not a great reader, and I really never have been. I've always been a studier of almanacs and statistics and read, nonfiction as opposed to fiction. I'm a big self-help reader as well. I'm constantly trying to work on myself and improve. In terms of fiction, though, I like the classics like The Great Gatsby. It's probably the only book that I read over and over again and bring it out every few years and watch the movies and all that. And I haven't done that in a while, so it's kind of inspiring me to get back there. But I'm a really bad reader, and I try to get my kids to become good readers because I have no tolerance for fiction, sitting down and reading it.
What's your favorite place in the world?
Place in the world, Los Angeles. I grew up in Connecticut. I still live in Connecticut. LA, I didn't go there for the first time until I was like in my mid-30s. It's always been the impossible dream for me to go to California and experience it all and then one day live there, and it still is sort of that possible. It's weird. Growing up, my father rides motorcycles. Drove a motorcycle to Florida when I was a baby, came back and said, my dream in life is to live there and retire there. And he was able to retire in his late 40s and move there and still lives there today with my mom. And, it was like, I heard about that dream forever. Dream to live in a place where you can ride a motorcycle full time all year long. And, that's not my dream, but I get it on the idea that to me, not LA proper, but, greater Los Angeles with the combination of desert, mountain, and ocean. I'm a giant national parks nerd, big nature fan. It's calling me, man. When I go out there to cover fights it's the most beautiful place on earth. I love Mexican culture. I love the people. I love the food. There's no better food city than LA. And I grew up 90 minutes from New York, but there's no better food city than LA.
What's your favorite combat sport? Like if you were closed in a room forever and can only watch one, which one would that be?
It would be boxing. And I do understand that consistently UFC and MMA delivers more than boxing, but it's just crazy to me that 2 times a year or 3 times a year or sometimes 1 time a year, that big boxing event is the biggest thing going in sports. Like that thing takes cultural prominence, and that's why I think like everybody's a boxing fan. Like everybody deep inside would be if the sport only had governing and control and organization, and you always got to see the best fight the best and all that stuff, and it wasn't so confusing and bizarre and controversial. And it's odd we toy with that because some of the craziness of it, it's what attracts us as boxing fans. Yet it's this out of control sport. I would pick that over all three. And I've gone some serious runs where each one was my individual favorite, but I'm a boxing guy from day one. It's a classic mano-a-mano, basic yet really scientific and strategic sport. And I don't know if it's the connection to like, let's settle this outside with our fists. And it's odd because I've never been in a fist fight. I've thrown a punch, I got hit with a punch, but never really been in like a fist fight. And yet there's this like romanticism. I can remember my dad, who was a fireman and was a big time union member for the local fire union. So there would be these union meetings and it was a big deal. And he'd be lacing up his boots and I'd be like, Dad, where are you going? He's like, I got a union meeting. So I'd be like, well, why are you so stressed out? Like, what's going on? He's like, can I be honest with you? He's like, there's going to be a fight tonight. I'm like, what? He's like, there's actually going to be a fist fight. He's like, the issues are so thing that it's probably going to end with one guy punching him. And I was just like, that's not polite society. We don't live, like, we live in a tough town, but we don't live in that, And my dad would come home through the years and be like, yeah, man, two guys had an argument. They just went out back and settled it. And it's that old school thing that I came up in schools where that was the regular. And I don't know if boxing to me is just like professional grudge settling. It's like, let's settle it in the ring. I love it. And it's so basic and beautiful.
What's the first item on your bucket list?
First item on my bucket list is to run a marathon. And that might sound weird and crazy, and I've come close before. I ran cross country in high school, but didn't apply myself, smoked cigarettes in the woods, and there was a brief period at the end where I went for it. And I was like, wow, I think I could have been somebody in this sport. I think I could have, I set this impossible dream of this time goal that I would get to, and I got that time goal exactly in the last race of the year. And I'm like, I should run. Well, guess what happened? I didn't run for 10 years, and I did bad things, and I drank a lot. And I sort of turned my life around in my late 20s, and I just started running, man, and I got hooked. And I started training for a marathon. I said, I'm going to go. I remember waking up one day and go, what's the impossible dream in Bryan Campbell's life? And I go, 26.2 miles is the impossible. It's the most preposterous idea I could ever come up with. And I said, I'm going to buy a book on how to do it, and I'm going to do it. And I got deep into training. Now, to train for a marathon, if you don't know, it's like a part-time job. It takes about 4 months on average. And you've got to come, and it's 5 days a week, and you've got to put in the damn time and build your life around it, build your work schedule around it. Sometimes you're running late at night in the rain. Sometimes, you got to get those miles in. And it was an incredible growing process. And I was to the point where my training runs on the weekends were 15 miles long, which is an experience unto itself. I was getting there. I was about a month and a half away from the race. I bought the tickets, airline, all that to go to Florida for it. And I got that phone call. This for the second time, I told you, for ESPN when they offered me that job. And I tried for a week to juggle marathon training with a full-time day job and a part-time night job. And I remember going, okay, it's okay. I can give this up. I've given up ESPN before when it came back. I can give up this running goal, and I can take this ride with ESPN and see where it goes. And I've never tried it again. But I'm only 41. You can peak late in your running career. I will accomplish that goal. To some people, they've done it every couple of years, and that's fine. To me, it's the impossible damn dream.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll accomplish it. Bryan, thanks very much for your time. I'm so excited to have you. I did not expect it to be so much fun. I mean, I knew it's going to be funny. I didn't know it's going to be so much fun and so educational. I appreciate it.
No,